The network test taught us a lot about what Elden Ring Nightreign actually is and what the future holds for this game. Today, we'll take a look at a lot of new information we learned, starting with my favorite new feature. Let's go. Let me know what you're most excited about in the comments down below. Now, the feature that I'm actually most excited for is quite a small one. It's nothing that exciting, but it is exciting to me, and that's the new Archer Reticule. So I first noticed this at the sparring grounds, which, by the way, at the sparring grounds, you can grab any of the weapons that are available in the game and play with them with the different characters, which is probably something worthwhile doing, as we'll get into why it's a little different depending on which character you're playing with certain weapons a little bit later in this video. But the Archer Reticule is something I'm actually legitimately excited for, because in Elden Ring, the Archer Reticule is quite trash and you literally cannot use it. Here, it actually is a legitimate feature that is sort of that over-the-shoulder proper reticule that you can move around and actually use. Now, I am very keen to see how this works with the specific Archer character, as there is one coming that we do know. We don't know exactly what their abilities specifically are. I did make a video speculating on the information that we do have about their different abilities, so I will link that here if you want to go and check that out. But I am excited to play Elden Ring in quite a different way, as this seems like it will be a viable system to use, so you can deal damage from range, and there is a ton of ranged weapons that are dropping, at least in the network test, so you will hopefully be able to find a really good solid range build, which you can't really do in Elden Ring. Character archetypes are a big thing with these different characters, and they all feel very unique, but also there's a lot of hidden things that we don't really see, which I was a little disappointed about, but I hope that maybe that'll change for the full launch. So all the different archetypes, and why I really like this system, is because they all sort of have a rough guide about where you'll kind of take them. Like Wilder, for example, has a greatsword to start with, but they also have a perk in Relics that will then buff their ability to add like a fire effect to the end of their like basic claw shot ability, which I really liked. But they're also a bit more of a jack of all trades, probably like evenly distributed between strength and dex. The Guardian, for example, is much more of a shield focused archetype, because one of their passive abilities is focused on that shield, but also they seemingly have quite a high strength count as well, so really good for like large weapons as well as shield using. The Duchess is sort of a prototype dexterity user, good for dual wielding, plus with their abilities very high damage and status effect output. And the Recluse is like a typical intelligence staff wielder, really, with a great like infinite FP regen mechanic with her ability. And I like how different these all feel, and we've obviously got the 4 more still to come, which I think this is actually the strongest part about Nightreign, is how different these characters feel. Assumedly the extra 4 will feel different as well, but not only do the characters feel different, it leads to each map feeling unique. Even though in the network test we only had the same map essentially with 2 variations, because of the hero you're playing and the gear that drops, it did feel different every run to sort of try something new. Like I had an amazing Wilder run with like 2 scythes, and I sort of did like a dual wield setup that way. That was absolutely fantastic, and it feels unique sometimes when you get those like really good runs. But not all runs are good though, which I think is also part of the fun here, is trying to find like that perfect run. Now, another thing that I did notice as well is that how the leveling actually works. So we did know prior to the network test that you don't pick stats in the same way you did in Elden Ring. You would just like level up and then pick it for you. But there's actually more to this that's kind of interesting to know. So with each of the character archetypes, they all, when you max them out to level 15, will have a different value to their HP, their stamina, and their FP, because those underlying Elden Ring stats are actually still there. Now, we know this because there are relics that specifically increase 1 or 2 of these specific stats for, say, applying that relic to certain characters. What's interesting about this is that you can't see those underlying stats for these characters in any way that I could find. Like, I actually don't know if it's possible. If it is, let me know in the comments. I looked through all the menus, could not see if you could actually see the underlying stats, but you could see like the main ones, like your HP, your FP, and your stamina, etc. Now, the reason this is important, not only because it's good to know this information, especially if, say, you know, like it kind of makes sense, right? If I'm playing as Recluse, I would equip the relic that gives a +2 intelligence, because I'm using an intelligence weapon most of the time, right? With the intelligence-based staffs and everything like that. But the reason this is important is because there is actually still weapon scaling, typical to in Elden Ring, how you would have weapon scaling to specific attributes. You can see this at the sparring ground when you look at the armaments and look at the full list of like the information about those weapons. Now, because they do have that attribute scaling with weapons, all of the characters also have the attributes, right? So it would be good to know, say if I'm playing Guardian, what my strength is, and if a weapon is going to scale better with strength, because then you want to get into that minute information of picking up those weapons and using them. Now, to some regard, you kind of know because of Elden Ring, but this is a brand new game, guys. You need to put that information in the game so that we can actually see how that's going to work. And we've touched on it a couple of times, but I am interested in the relics as well. Now, some of the relic information that we do know now is that heroes will have 3 relic slots. Now, in the network test, you couldn't change the color of those relic slots, but you will be able to in the full game through a system called Relic Rights. Now, the relics have different quality ranks and can have up to 3 perks. The delicate rank, which I assume you get from clearing world bosses basically in the world, is 1 perk. Polished is, I assume, get from completing a night and like beating one of those end of day bosses. You get 2 perks, and the grand, I only got these mostly from defeating the Night Lord. These will contain 3 perks. Now, even inside those like 1 to 2 to 3 perks, they're not all made the same, as some of the effects can have like a +1 or a +2 on the end, essentially making them even stronger. The relics were pretty cool. I actually did like this part of the network test. Multiplayer though, not a fan. I talked about this in my preview video, and you can go watch that if you want more thoughts on it, but really there needs to be improvements to, I don't want to use passwords. I want to actually invite my friends like how every other game does it. I also would like a better way to communicate with people, like over voice, like having a voice chat in the game would be fantastic. Like having communication specifically locked to pings and gestures. No one's going to use gestures because you have to go through 3 menus in order to get it. And then pings, for example, they do work. I do like the ping system. I do like as well if multiple people ping one ping, it like changes to white so you know that multiple people are going there. But you do need a way to talk to these people so that you can communicate in a much more meaningful way or have a bit more information. Like even if you had like a similar to say an Overwatch or like a Marvel Rival or something, how they have like that communication wheel, you can be like, I'm defending here or I'm doing this. Like even just basic communications that you can actually say to people would be definitely appreciated. Bosses types will actually be reflected in the gear that they drop. So we'll talk about this in a bit more detail when we talk about the map variations in this video, but essentially when you go to a location and you fight a certain boss, for example, if you fight like the flame chariots, you'll typically get a fire weapon out of that. Same as if you beat the Crystallians, you get like a frost weapon or a magic weapon. Typically the location and the icon, like the status effect icon you see on it, will give you a rough indication of the type of gear you're going to get from that drop, which is something that I noticed throughout the network test. So when I was playing as Duchess and I really wanted to make like status builds, I was often targeting these locations to say, get, a bleed weapon from like the blood loss areas or something like that, which is a good mechanic. And I like that you can sort of target specific locations in that way. Something about these bosses as well that I wasn't a huge fan of is the Everjails. Like I feel like there's something missing here because you have to get a Stoneswood key, which is a random drop, to then take to an Everjail, and then you unlock that Everjail, and then you beat that boss, and all you get is like some runes. I feel like there should be a drop there or something special about it. Feels like there's something missing about the Everjails because they're kind of not worth it right now. Legendary weapons are a thing. Now you can view this in the sparring ground under armaments. You can see that most categories have like one of their weapons that has been made like the legendary variant. What's interesting about this as well is that legendary weapons have like their unique weapon skills. Typically like these are, the boss weapons from Elden Ring, how they all have unique skills. They also have a passive ability just like all the other weapons. Seemingly, dragons drop the best gear in the game, so you'll typically get like at least a purple or occasionally legendary drops from dragons that are pretty easy to fight, at least in the network test. Surely there'll be harder ones in the full game. But I also noticed that there are the smithing stones as well. Now, the most common one is the one that you'll just buy from the vendors, which is just like the smithing stone 1, which will increase a weapon from like common to like its blue variety. Smithing stone 2, I typically found in mines, and that'll make any weapon purple. And then it is possible, seemingly, if you look at the strength and armament screen, that you can make weapons, any weapon legendary tier via an ancient smithing stone. But how exactly you get them, unknown. I did not get a single one or even see a way you could get them in the network test. Definitely something we'll have to wait for the full game to figure out. Something else to note is that the smithing stone 2s were typically found in caves, which were kind of annoying to like go through because they're very easy to get lost. I'd never found a boss down there. I never really was incentivized to actually explore them. I would sort of go through like the doorway and run until I found like a drop, then open that drop and hope that I got a smithing stone 2. If I didn't, I would just leave the cave in fear of getting lost in there and you know, like getting stuck in the zone itself as it's closing, like when the rain comes in. I would like a bit more explanation again on how the smithing stones are going to work, the specific ways to find them, but I'm sure we'll get all that information at launch as well. I touched on this in my preview thoughts as well, but I do think the game is really going to live and die by its map variations. Now we know that Limveld is like where we're going most of the time, which is the remix of Limgrave. It has been mentioned in interviews that there will be no maps based on like Caelid or Lernia or the Atlas Plateau or something, at least at launch. What will be changing here is like the enemies, the bosses, those point of interest key locations that you can view in the codex to see what they actually mean, but these will actually be randomized throughout each of the sessions. In the network test, we only saw 2 variations on this and they were static otherwise. They've mentioned in interviews that there's going to be like drastic changes to the map as you progress, and what exactly that means, really hope we get an explanation, because if it is just this Limveiled variation on Limgrave and then they change these points of interest locations only, and that's like the drastic changes, I don't know if that's going to sustain a large player base over a long period of time. You have so many regions that you built for Elden Ring. There is no reason why they shouldn't appear, at least in some regard, into Elden Ring Nightreign to really mix up the map variety. Like imagine if for one map you go into Limveiled, essentially Limgrave, you do your business, you beat the Night Lord, whatever. The next one is completely different. It's Caelid or it's the Atlas Plateau, completely different vibes, look, feel. Really hope that that is something that does come into the game, even if it's after launch. Like even if we only get Limveiled at launch, really think it would make such a positive impact to the game's overall health and life. What's still to come? Like what didn't we get in the network test? There's a few things. We know that there are 7 more Night Lords to face. We know that there are these map variations that will be coming, and the depth of those we don't actually know, but we do know it's coming. There will be 4 more characters to play as. We've only got access to the first 4 here, and we do have a rough idea about what those other 4 are. And we'll also be able to buy skins, gestures, relics, and the relic rights using that extra currency that we were getting at the end of runs in the network test, which you couldn't actually do anything with in the network test. So we do know that there's a lot more content coming here, but also there could be even more, right? I don't want to put like false hope in you or anything, but FromSoft have always been quite cheeky with what's actually in their games, and it might be the case here as well. There might be more that they're just not telling us about, so we'll have to wait for the full launch to see. But look, I'm really interested to know what you guys were excited about with the network test and what you thought. Let me know in the comments down below, and we'll have more Nightreign content coming the closer we get to launch. But thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.